Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here talking about how us as farmers can reach consumers more directly and thereby getting a larger share of the retail price that retailers pay. So before I studied for farming, my first degree was in philosophy. So I've always learned to ask why. So if we look at the big questions, I think, in Nuffield, people quite often ask the question, how? And it's an excellent question. How do we get more milk solids out of grass? How do we make our farms more efficient? But I'd like to ask, why is the food industry the way it is? And, just go back a bit. And in order to do that, we're going to have a look at the food system as a whole. So we'll go through research objectives, models, how it applies to Irish agriculture, conclusions and recommendations. But really the questions I'm asking are why, what, how, who, and why not? So a little bit about myself. Mary introduced me, thank you. So I'm farming a 30-hectare farm. That's not very big. It's 1/3 forestry, 1/3 conventional crops, winter barley, and 1/3 organic lamb and agri-environmental. My own journey in selling from the farm has moved from selling wholesale, tons of barley to the co-op, to moving towards trying to sell directly to consumers. And that has led to a more profitable farm, certainly more income, a number of awards, including from Enterprise Ireland, Design Council of Ireland, Blas na Heron just a couple of days ago. And also quite a lot of media attention. Thank you very much for the Farmers Journal and the Sunday Independent and various other features in magazines. And it's all been led through, my farm produce has been led through a brand called Brookfield Farm. So if anyone's looking for good farm produce, it's brookfield.farm on the website. So the aim is for successful farms, thriving rural area, excellent food and farm produce selling directly to the consumer. And I believe that the key to rural sustainability, a little bit like Tom said earlier, there's a range of farm types and diversification models. And so I'm going to look at models that we can work with in the Irish context so that farms can reach consumers more easily and get more of the money that consumers pay. So I'm going to be looking at some examples from travel and research next. But first, we have a problem. This is back to the why, about the food system. Our current food system is the world's largest industry, just to take a helicopter view of it. It employs 1 billion people. It's worth $1 trillion. And it feeds 7.5 billion people every day. That's possibly 15 billion meals a day, including the meals that we've eaten this morning and we're going to eat later on together. But the world is changing. And if we look at our planetary boundaries, coming from my environmental hat, the green shows where within the ability of the planet to regenerate itself in terms of the pollution that we're producing to make in all our activities, not just food, ocean acidification, the climate. Where we're in trouble is the aspects that are particularly related to agriculture. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, the biodiversity loss is largely associated with agriculture, and that is something I think we can do something about if we change our food system. Also, our nitrogen cycle at the right-hand side is way beyond the planetary ability to regenerate within the planet, and also the climate crisis that we quite often say, oh yes, yes, and then we don't actually work out what to do about it. So I'm coming up with something that we as consumers and as farmers can actually act and help. Another couple of things. In the current environment, it is harder for farmers and producers to actually get the food out there. And in the Irish situation, it's not much better. In Irish agriculture, we're using 5 to 7 times our share of world resources, which is put in terms of what's called a global hectare. And if you look at the map of Europe, we are among the worst in Europe, I'm afraid. If you look at, say, France, Spain, the UK, they're using between 3 to 5 times the global hectares. America's using 7, but we're using over 5 times our share of the planet's resources. The Netherlands is rather worse, it's using over 7, and so is Sweden. Most of Africa uses about equivalent, about 1 global hectare, so they're about on target for what the planet can actually manage to keep on sustaining us at. If we look at Ireland itself, the threatened species, we've got a lot of animals on red lists, including 1/3 of the animals close to my heart. 1/3 of the Irish bee species are either extinct or under threat, and there's the whole range of everything that is blue, orange, green to the right-hand side, or left-hand side rather, is either extinct or under threat. And our habitats. Only 9% of our habitats, our listed habitats in Ireland, are in good condition. All the rest of them are either in very bad condition or are actually very degraded. And that covers things like marine coasts, freshwater, forests, grasslands, heaths. So we're not doing a great job, but I think the most threatened species in Ireland might be the Irish farmer. If we look at farm income, and that's something I'm very interested in, because there is no point in having a very environmental sustainable farm producing great food if you're not in business in a couple of years. So our farm incomes have dropped. We only have about 70% of our farm incomes today based with the year 2000. And it's even worse when we look back at 1981 incomes. We've dropped in dairy 24% in real terms, and tillage we're up to minus 72% compared with what you could expect as a tillage income in 1981, according to the Farming Independent and to the IFA. Now, so these are all good reasons to change the current food system, which puts the farmer at one end, a great complicated global food system, and then the consumer at the other end. So we have world population malnourished, 2.8 billion people are micronutrient and calorie deficient. We've got 2 billion overweight and obese. Those are both types are considered to be malnourished, one too thin, one too large. And the planet we've talked about is people, planet, agrobiodiversity is we've lost 75% of our crops that farmers use, which is that's rather serious. Particularly when you look at the Irish famine, where we went down to 2 potato varieties, and that ended not so well for us. And our food system is very complex and vulnerable. We have scandal after scandal. We had the Brazilian meat scandal, the horse meat scandal, and contaminated eggs a couple of months ago in Europe, and now an unfolding crisis with the biggest chicken producer processor in the UK, mislabeling chickens, taking back out-of-date chickens, that kind of thing. So farmers in the system are not served well. So what do we do? Do we go bigger? This is a farm I saw in Illinois, 10,000 acres growing. These farms are typically growing by 2,000 acres a year. So you have farms that are very few people. Is that the way we want to go? Tom also said that he didn't think that model would suit Ireland. Here's another model, which is in Indonesia. This is a 30,000 hectare pineapple farm with 6,000 employees. The owners live in Singapore. So that's a kind of a labor-intensive but very low income. I don't think we want that model either, do we? This is another model that I think might help us, which is, this is a Japanese farmer based in Shigeo, and he bases his industry on producing popcorn. And what he does is he sells it directly to people. He set up a popcorn factory on his farm. So farm to consumer. I traveled to these different countries and I received a lot of inspiration about farmers all over the world are finding ways to reach consumers. So it's not just diversification, it's also new models. It's using things that, for instance, Amazon have just bought Whole Foods. So we're going to be doing a lot more buying food online, and that gives us as farmers an opportunity. Building relationships with consumers is important. And the relevance to Irish agriculture, how does this affect me, you might ask, as a farmer? I'm producing lamb, I'm producing dairy. You can use the same strategies as the models I'm about to talk about and add value to your crops and direct sell, not just for lamb, dairy and eggs, but also for more exotic products that I saw, like smoked eels. There are 14 million eels in Lough Neagh, for instance. We could be using them. Also melons, popcorn, stuff like that. So the models are online and mail order. There's a particularly nice example from a farm market in the UK that is now delivering to your house called Farm Direct. Which has a turnover of about 400,000. 60% of the retail price goes back to the consumer. La Ruche-Kadiwi is a bigger example in France with a turnover of 12 million. And the Forano melon farm of 6.5 hectares is producing €600,000 in high-end melons that are being delivered directly to consumers. In diversification and value add, a bit like Tom's dairy farm, farmers are reaching restaurants and consumers directly, such as the lamb farm in Japan, where he's receiving €500 a head for each lamb by selling it directly to high-end restaurants. Also, the asparagus farm from Aveling in East England, which is selling directly to restaurants like Ottolenghi in London. And the 10 Farmers Farm in Korea, where they have a turnover of $13 million, with visitors of 1 million visiting a 3.5 hectare farm where they grow vegetables. And the final is a kind of a cooperative. So we have cooperatives in Ireland, but this particular cooperative is interesting. Han Salim in South Korea, where the farmers and the processors all have co-ops, which is what we know, but they went further and have retail shops. So the consumers are also part of the co-op, and 76% of the retail price goes back to the farmers in this system. Now, it's not a small thing. This particular co-op feeds 1.2 million consumers and has a turnover of, 100 million. And also, a third of the food in Korea goes through these co-op systems, so it's not isolated. So how do we apply this? We've got potential to scale and amend. We've got turnover in these kind of farms, which is much higher than similar size and type farms. And also, because the consumers are dealing directly with the farmers, we've got sustainability built in. And in every farm, every type of farm, when I traveled around the world, I saw this happening in every different type, between arable, livestock, etc. There are challenges. The farmer is far from the consumer at the moment. It's not for every farmer. Is the consumer prepared to pay? In the EU, in the 1980s, we spent 30% of our income on food. Now it's 13%. But in Ireland, considering that our income is dropping relative year on year, we should actually have a go. So in conclusion, this photograph is taken on my farm. A television crew was photographing some of my farm produce. In conclusion, farm direct sales can provide environmental public goods and can provide employment in rural areas. If we set up Teagasc Enterprise Ireland research clusters to help develop this, to identify gaps in the routes for markets for producers and identify points of access for consumers and civil society, for instance, local hospitals and schools sourcing directly from local farmers, then you could start changing the system. We need to reshape our food systems towards sustainability. That's the take-home message. The EU is very keen to do this. They have a task force set up to reposition the farmer in the food system, to put the farmer more back in the middle. And we now have an opportunity with modern technology, such as like websites like Airbnb, where you can reach farmers in a way that you never could before. So I ask you as consumers, and I ask you as farmers, if we need to change our food system, which we clearly do, the question is not why, but it's why wouldn't we? Why not? Thank you very much.